All right, so hello and welcome to the PT's PT podcast. Today I've got Holly Petersen of 8150 Advisors, a company that we work very closely with. Welcome, Holly.
Thanks so much for having me, Sean. I appreciate it.
Great. So do you want to just start by telling the audience a little bit about who you are, what you do, and a little bit about your background?
Oh, sure. So I am a physical therapist by training. If I go back to my roots, I've always had that inkling of loving operations. It's been something that I've been really passionate about. And so I treated an outpatient orthopedic all my career and found myself moving up into the clinic director role, and then made myself a corporate role, if you would say, at a large practice in the region, and really loved systems and people. And got to have experience with mergers and acquisitions, which was really exciting. Just things that when you're in PT school, you don't realize that are potentially out there as opportunities as providers. And then there was a great opportunity for me to really work with more practices through 8150 Advisors, which gave me a great opportunity to hone in on the ownership side of practices, looking at finances and operations, as well as the leadership value of ensuring that the skills that are needed to pull our clinicians forward are developed, which we often don't see in schooling. So it hit on two of my passions. I got to teach leaders the things I wish I knew when I was in leadership, and then to work with owners on really remaining, the captains of their ship and making sure that they're on the trajectory they're looking for.
So if you're a PT and you're listening to this podcast today, there's going to be a lot of great information because Holly and 8150 are our leadership consulting team. So they work with us to train all of our leaders and to help develop our business. So let's just call it out. Most PT clinic owners nowadays, as you and I both know, are stressed out. They're frustrated with hiring. When people come to 8150, what are they coming to you guys for primarily?
Yeah, I think that you highlighted that frustration, right? Working harder than ever, recruiting and retention challenges. So they realize, hey, I'm doing this and I don't want to be doing it alone anymore. And who can I go to? Sometimes they don't have a team of people around them, and we're a great external resource to bring in. We love data-driven information. We love making sure we have research to help move leaders forward. So they're coming to us when they want support, sometimes validation, sometimes challenging. Here's where I am, here's where I want to go, and I'm not quite sure how to get from where I am to where I want to be.
What do you find, maybe like two or three things? What is the disconnect between what most owners or private practice, practitioners think is wrong in the business and what actually is going on?
And that's interesting. I think thinking about what's inside of our control versus what's outside of our control, I think it's really easy. We know the APTA has identified it. There's an actual shortage of PTs. So the hiring challenge or feeling is real. We know reimbursement is not heading in the direction that we're looking for. So we sit there are a lot of things that are stacking up against us. And we have to pull away from that and think about, well, what can we control? And so I think that shift is so important to understand, hey, we can control our culture, we can control our leadership, and we can try to attract really high quality providers by what we're doing differently.
Do you find that most practice owners are able to identify those things, or you feel like they're really lost when they come to you?
I don't know if they're lost. I think the owners understand that there's opportunity out there, yet I know we've talked about before about bottlenecks. And as an owner, they can become almost like a point of failure for the practice when everything has to run through them, when if they step away, things start to falter. And so that realization of like, I might have created a job rather than a business. And I want to be able to step away, and I want to be able to flourish, and I want other PTs to be excited to work here where we're doing something different. I don't know about you, did you start Concierge because you didn't like the way things were being done?
It's a good question, Holly. I think, every business starts as a job. And so your job, if you're going to be a business owner and you're going to be an entrepreneur and a CEO, is to work yourself out of every single job that you have in the company, including CEO, eventually. And that's the way that I look at it. And that's, why I hired you guys, right? To help see the blind spots, because we're growing fast. We've grown 100% year over year for 4 or 5 years in a row, which is just, as you get larger, it's just almost impossible to do. But we've got the pedal to the metal. And, I think that when your dream isn't big enough, that's when you get stuck. And going back to we need more PTs, we need more PTs, we need more PTs. I think everybody in this field, especially around here in Massachusetts and more so like in Central Mass, some of the more rural areas, the PTs want to live around Boston, right? And we found that clinics that we open up near Boston tend to be easier to staff. That said, finding the right people is still hard because we look for a certain person. How often do you feel that, people who say I can't find good PTs are actually hiding a different problem where they have a different problem?
Sure.
And what do you think that problem is?
I love the word like finding good PTs versus attracting good PTs. And so to me, where you highlighted, we're in Massachusetts. Outpatient physical therapy offices are essentially like coffee shops, right? You can find one on every corner, and each one's going to speak to different patients and different providers, different team members. So you get your big chains, your local chains, you got your mom and pops. And so for me, there are people who are drawn to each of those as a customer and as a potential, employee. What are you doing to attract people to what you're creating? And so as much as it's finding, I think it's attracting and nurturing. So that ability, like, hey, they're doing something different. They're doing something cool. They care about me and my growth and development. That's where people are excited to go to because they can have the pick. And I won't go down the road of like, yes, salary matters. And, when we look at autonomy, mastery, purpose, like when you can go somewhere where you can really grow and develop over time, which I know you guys have poured a lot of resources into, that's exciting for people right now. The money, yes, that matters to a certain extent. And the ability to feel like you have growth and investment in you, we really feel like it's resonating with a lot of providers.
Yeah, and I think, that's obviously part of what you guys have set up with us here at Concierge. So right now we've created, I think, 3 layers of leadership training. And really that's not only part of the attraction process of bringing in PTs that want to be more than just Joe PT, the staff clinician, and some PTs are great with that. And they want to be staff clinicians for the rest of their life. And that's awesome, and if they just want to be the best clinician possible, we're never going to say no, and if they're a great teammate, right? Like a lot of that, like there are other things that matter other than just being, Mr. Clinical PT, right? But maybe you should talk about things that we've done together, Holly, to help not only attract the best talent in the area, but to develop that talent.
Sure. So one thing you did touch on, Sean, I think is interesting that, clinical leadership and managing others isn't for everyone. Some people are happy to go the clinical route and pursue clinical excellence versus leadership excellence. And so that's an avenue. And the leadership avenue is sometimes less definable. It's harder to create. So that's what we've worked on with you. We had a leadership program that we felt like was great to come in to supplement the skills that providers aren't taught in school that are critically important for success as a leader, not just a high performer. And then we realized, hey, there are actually tiers to this because as you move through the leadership process, going from being, an entry-level clinician, that it's great to learn a lot of the soft skills that matter with patient interactions. And then you start to apply those now to team interactions where, you're side by side helping to manage and work with peers. And now all of a sudden, clinic director role, wow, you're accountable for the performance of the clinic as a whole in a team, not just yourself. And so those are really defined skill sets in progression over time. And so what we've done together is really found a way to support people at each level of their growth and development journey so that they can feel like they can have the soft skills, give the difficult feedback, have a coaching conversation, and hold people accountable in a way that is exciting and not militant.
But militant is fun. No, let's talk.
And that's why we built layers between Sean and his team.
Let's talk about examples, Holly, because I think it's all well and good. And I think I think about all these gurus and everybody, they talk in generality, right? Like, let's talk nuts and bolts, right? Okay. So like at the, new grad level, what are some of the tools that we actually give or strategies that we give these new grads? What do we talk about when we're training these new grads to become better professionals?
Absolutely. Well, this is great timing. So we met with 2 of your new grad groups yesterday, and we were talking through the DISC profile, which is similar to a bunch of other tools out there that help us to kind of identify where people are. I don't like to bucket them, but just to be aware of where they show up naturally and where they can stretch. And one of the funny parts of the conversation was like, hey, in school, we never talk about like meeting a patient where they're at, like energy wise, pain wise, right? If I'm a big gregarious personality and I come in at a 10 and my patient's in pain is simmering at a 2, if I come in with that high level energy, it's a mismatch. And that's felt by the patient, it's felt by the provider. And so it's subtle and it's interesting, but like, hey, how can we meet people where they are to get the most out of them and to grow and develop with them? So for patients, as they continue through their journey through physical therapy, that 2 energy that they bring may change as they become more functional and have less pain. Similarly, with our team members, hey, how do we meet people where they're at? There's some people who like to come in the morning and need 5 minutes to adjust. There's some people who come in and as soon as the door swings open, like they're jamming out and ready to go. Like there's differences that matter in how to read a room and read people. That is like emotional intelligence. And if we don't nail down our own personal emotional intelligence to become a leader and start reading rooms and adapting, that's something that's not easy for people. So 101 is like, let's get emotional intelligence leveled in by knowing more about ourselves and how we show up and come across to people. And then we can work on some of the more technical components of leadership.
Let's talk about the jump from staff clinician to leadership, right? Because we talk about, knowing your disc profile, knowing how you show up first. I think that's super important because if you don't know yourself, it's going to be hard to know what your weaknesses in communication are. And I think as clinicians, speaking for myself, I always thought I was a great communicator because I got results with my patients, right? My patients did what I told them to do and they got better. And it was great. But when I got into leadership, and I've had, a history in leadership, like I had leadership roles in high school and college, and then, and it wasn't until I started my own business that it became real, right? So then it became real, and then you're, the first person you're leading quits, right? And you take it personally, and you're like, oh man, that person stinks, right? Like, because you immediately blame the other person. It's like, instead of looking in the mirror and saying, what could I have done differently? You sort of go through like the 5 stages of grief, right? Which is ridiculous. But, talking it, in the humility that it's honestly, it's humbled me greatly to go through each layer of the leadership journey because I've had to see, and change a lot of hard truths about, how I saw the world. And it's really kind of unique watching others go through the same process with you in our company. But let's talk about the jump from staff PT to like team leader, clinic director, and how, the difficulties in that jump and who makes that jump, in your opinion, the most successfully.
Sure. You said something so perfectly earlier, right? Like I got patients better because I told them what to do and they did it. So this is the challenge for physical therapists across the board is we are great at being prescriptive, right? We know how to make you better. We know what will get you to where you need to go. That doesn't always land great when you're a leader and you start treating your team the same way you treat your patients. Like you're solving all their problems, you're stepping in, like just do this and it'll be okay. And it's not one size fits all. So that clinician to leader, I love the team leader buffer, an ability to grow under the mentorship of a clinical director, to have opportunities to start to be exposed to the business side of the practice. As a staff PT, you treat patients. That's what you get good at. That's the engine behind the whole thing. And when those who are interested in more of what the business has to offer and more responsibility and increased leadership, that team lead role is something that they get to grow and expand into while still focusing predominantly on clinical care and learning about all the things that happen sometimes in front of the scenes and behind the scenes that help to make the clinic tick.
Why doesn't promoting the best clinician always work?
Fan favorite, right? Like, hey, so-and-so does this great. We should promote them because they'll do well. And there's Harvard Business Review articles about this. There's a lot of psychology behind it. And I think when we distill it down, what it comes down to is those who know how to do the job well and pursue personal excellence, that's not always transferable to team excellence. So that shift from me to we, they may know how to self-motivate. Do they know how to team motivate? They may know how to hold themselves accountable to expectations. Can they hold others accountable to expectations? You don't really have to have a difficult conversation with yourself when there's underperformance. Now you have to, someone you've worked side by side with, you have to let them know, hey, the expectation's here, you're there. What can we do? You have to be an ally to get them there. And sometimes for high performers, that feels like at a cost of your own performance. And so that temporary slowdown and pause of like nurturing other people so that the team's more effective, when we're used to saying, hop on my back, like high performers are the ones that had the project in PT school or school and like, don't worry guys, I'll take care of it. Just send me what you have, I'll get it over the finish line. And that's like who we are. A lot of PTs, I don't mean to bucket everyone, but I tend to, you ask your group of people, hey, who was the one to finish the project in your group in school? I was usually the high performer. And so that mentality of I can get us over, that doesn't work and that doesn't transfer anymore, because we have to think about team success versus individual success and how to communicate effectively with others and motivate others. Where are we learning about that and where are we getting those skills? Because they're skills. You wouldn't come in and try to manipulate someone's low back without learning something first. So that's, I think, one of the challenges.
I think that's a really good point. And I think going back to skills, talk to me about the malleability of the learner, right? Because we found, in real practice that some people have incredible difficulty applying those skills. Because I think you can learn a skill like spinal manipulation or leadership, quote unquote. But what does that look like in daily practice?
Sure. And I think you highlight that there. When we present it on a PowerPoint slide on Zoom, it is so easy. We talk about brain-friendly feedback. So just to walk through that, like, hey, check in with the person to make sure they're receptive for feedback. Stay rooted in objective data. Don't go telling your side of the story. Seek their understanding. Make sure they know, the impact of that behavior. Okay, great. That's easy. When you go to have that conversation in front of someone, that is tough. And so I think this idea is that like, oh, that is easy. I can check the boxes. That seems easy enough. When you go back to like a clinical skill, like until you palpate the landmarks, and the landmarks might be different on everyone, right? No two bodies are the same. And so this idea of like, well, one size fits all, or it's easy. I saw it on the slide. I can do it if I need to. Well, that would be like never practicing a manual skill in PT school until you were 3 years out, or saying, I got it. I don't actually need to do it on someone. That's the gap. It's like you learn it and then practice it. And I say practice it at home. Leaders who go through leadership development should show up better in their personal lives and in their professional lives. So go home, try it with your roommate, try it with your partner, try it with someone who trusts you so you can fumble over it, because you will. And that's where you learn. You're like, oh, gosh, I should never say that again. But I'm glad I said it with you, Sean, because I trust you and you're not going to quit, get mad at me or hate me because I'm learning something new. And so that practice reps is really what gets us to where we need to be. But it takes time and it takes vulnerability. And I think sometimes type A personalities or perfectionists have a hard time letting down that guard to show like, hey, I'm learning something new and I'm not going to get it right out of the gate. Yet I need to continue to try it to get better.
And I immediately think of two things, Holly, when you talk about, palpation and trying things to get better. I think of role playing the conversations, and how often we do those. Like you do those on your leadership calls, I'm sure.
Yes.
But I think it's important to role play, and our clinic director team is great. And if they're having a difficult conversation with a staff member, we'll do this at retreats and things like this. We'll break down difficult conversations and have them among ourselves. And then we'll give kind of critique and feedback of the two people that are having the conversation, because no conversation is the same, and you tend to bring in your own emotions, right? Especially when it's if it's one of your direct reports, it really feels personal, right? So you have to acknowledge the fact that there is some personal piece in everything, and I think that it's just reps. The more you do something, the better you get at it. I hope. Generally, if you're getting feedback and you're reflecting, right? Yes. If you don't reflect, then you don't get the skills. You don't improve your skills. But that made me think of something else, specifically around, we talked about the best PTs, visit-wise or KPI-wise, not becoming the best leaders. I immediately think back to school, PT school, right? And I know at Northeastern, you at least had to have like a B plus or a B GPA to get through school. And about 25% of my class back in 2010 or whatever it was, were valedictorians of their high school. So legitimately had like never gotten a B or a C before in their life. So now you get into leadership, you have no skills because you were never taught how to do it. You don't have an MBA. You don't know any of these KPI things that we're talking about. You have no idea how to build a culture, right? But you may have a personality that's prone to being able to be great at building a culture or not, like me, because I'm a direct, communicator. And it's a really interesting phenomena, Holly's seeing or phenomenon, how people who are so used to succeeding or taking over that group project and bringing it across the finish line, they can't do it by themselves. So talk to me about that shift.
Yeah, I think that responsibility for yourself feels like one thing, right? Like I can do it for me. The me to we transition can be really hard. And the differences in motivating people, like you said, speaking to them in a way that resonates with them, communicating with them, withholding your story, knowing that some of your team, like we talk about the success as a team and failure as a leader, and that rubs a lot of people the wrong way. I think it depends on how you look at it, and it can feel personal. Yeah, because are you doing the best possible job leading? Are you getting your people to where they need to be? And so to your point, John, like you're saying, like, I'm not the great culture person. You're direct, get stuff done, execute. Here's where we're going, figure it out. And then you've supported a team around you that helps to say, okay, yep, Sean, yes, we're going to Hawaii. Sean knows we're going to Hawaii. We need Brooke to tell us like when our flights are, who's renting the car, is it a direct flight, right? So there's different personalities that help us along the way to get us to where we're going. And so as we think through the leaders we're supporting ourselves around, are they filling in the gaps that we have? I think that's a huge part of it. And then I think back to your point about, schooling and bringing up, like we have to be okay with failure and retrying, because you said this earlier about the reps. Knowledge is one thing, application's another. If you don't reflect on it, you're not actually growing. So I think the last time I was in this room with you, I brought a toolbox in and we talked about all the different literal leadership tools and the discernment on when to use a hammer versus a screwdriver. It looks easy on the PowerPoint.
What's a screwdriver?
Oh boy, we're talking manual labor. This isn't going to work well.
No, I'm kidding. Saying it's only a hammer or nothing else for me. But yeah, I'm kidding.
And that idea, right? That if we think, oh, I learned how to use a hammer, I'm now going to use a hammer everywhere because that's how I apply it without the reflection, then that's not successful either. And so the question, I know I've deviated pretty far from it at this point, but I just think there's a lot of discernment and discomfort that we need to get used to, because it's not a textbook that we get to regurgitate. It's not A, B, C, or D, because it's a person behind it. And so leading people is different than holding accountable to a metric, a measure, or some sort of personal performance.
We talk about the three-legged stool, and we talk about building a high-functioning team. Now, you work with businesses across the country, PT clinics, different clinic owners, different leaders. What does a high-functioning leadership team look like in reality as opposed to one that's just barely getting by?
Sure. I think mission, vision, and values is where we look at this a bit. Are we all rowing together? So I think of like owners start off rowing in the boat by themselves. Usually they have a direction. They're going to work on getting there. And it's a lot of grunt work. As you said, you have to really kind of go through the steps. Once you start adding people into the boat, are they aligned with where you're going? And can they contribute to the velocity in which you want to get there? And so the right people in the right seats who know the vision, because when we find people, as we just talked about earlier, who know how to drive themselves individually, but don't know how to drive the team, can you imagine someone rowing out a sink in a boat, what that does to the destination and the time it takes to get there? So I think that alignment is so important so that everyone knows where we're heading. I mean, your 10 and 10 is something like clean, concise, that's the direction. And so how can we get all your clinic directors, in your executive team rowing in that direction together to get there? That's a vision. When we're showing up, we're putting out fires, we're doing, we're in the day-to-day minutia, we're busy, but not efficient or effective. That can make a team feel like they're doing a lot. But when they come up out of the sand, they're like, oh, shoot, we really haven't moved. As opposed to the team that's like, all right, we know where we're going. We're rowing there. We're going to hit blips. And we still know where we're going to go. So we can get back on course sooner than those who are kind of wavering back and forth.
Yeah, you're not overloaded on levers because you pick one a quarter or pick one a month. You pull it and you're moving forward. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about, you brought up the person that's not rowing. or not rowing in the same direction.
Sure.
We've been through that here, definitely, as I'm sure many other businesses have, not just immune to PT. Talk to me about what that looks like from the outside looking in. And is it clear? Is it unclear? What kind of questions will you probe the leadership team for to find out whether they're aligned?
I think it's often not clear. It can be. So from an outside view, it's like, oh my gosh, how do they not see this? You can't read the label from inside the jar, which I think is wise to bring in other people to see it. And other times, I think people can be a bit of a chameleon and they can do the work, but are they leading? And so sometimes when you look at the numbers, when you look at things, like it looks okay, but something feels off. You go into the clinic and you're like, this doesn't match, like the energy's off. And so sometimes it's almost not a tangible metric that's off as much as it's a feel that's off, and it's a culture thing, and that's not as quantifiable. So sometimes that's where we can struggle, but you will start to feel, the rest of the team feels it, right? Someone's not rowing, or they're rowing out of sync. Everyone's like, they may not be able to identify it, but they're like, something feels off here. That's when we pull back. Yes, we can put the metrics aside. Let's look at culture. Let's look at values. Let's look at team retention. And those can be some indicators that maybe there's actually a leadership change that needs to happen, or there's a leadership opportunity to continue to grow and develop.
How can a bad leader affect a team?
Oh, gosh. Yeah. So it's interesting, right? The bad apple that ruins the bunch. I think there's a lot to be said about investing into people because they have areas to grow. They have opportunities to grow. We want the best for everyone. And at what point do we really need to remove the apple from the bunch because it becomes detrimental? And so we think about the culture shifts that can happen. I know you guys talk about, your greens, grays, and reds.
Yeah.
And so quickly a team can go from being green to red when the culture shifts, like the excitement. I want to walk into work and be excited of who I'm working with and the work I'm doing. And when that starts to pull down a little bit, those are the things that we start to see when that happens. And that's really tricky.
So give me more. So identification of those folks is typically, I feel like most owners maybe go through different stages, right? Like you kind of know in your gut that
Sure.
person isn't the right person in the right role, and then Gino Wickman has the get it, want it, has the capacity to do the job, GWC. I like that because it gives me a frame of reference to say, Holly's sitting in the COO seat. She gets it. She wants it. But maybe she doesn't have the capacity in her life right now because she just had kids, or, she has a sick loved one, or there's some sort of something happening outside of work maybe, or it's inside of work, right? Talk me through, I like the GWC concept, but talk me through how others, or how you, other intangibles that you look at that you're like, this works or it doesn't work.
Sure. I've worked off the GWC for a while as well, and I think that's huge. I think some people, it's a great checklist for it, right? Do you get the concepts? And people just don't understand the role. And that's really tricky. We have people who think like, oh, I'm excited to have the title. I may not actually get what the title includes for me, even though I have a job description. That want it is the hunger, right? Do they want to pursue this? Are they willing to invest? And then the capacity that you alluded to, I think sometimes it's the emotional capacity, the intellectual capacity. There's other capacities. We've talked about external, but internal capacity, an ability to know the job, live into the job, and do everything that's required of it. And that can be really hard. That's a great checklist. The other ones, you said, I think your gut often knows if something's not right. I think your team will often start sending up signals because I didn't really land it earlier, but the bad apple, right? That goes into culture. That goes into energy. Your patients can start to feel it, right? That if something's off. I like to joke that I know if my barista's having a bad day because the coffee tastes different. Like if our PTs are having a bad day, sometimes the care can feel different, and it's humans treating humans. So we try to check that at the door. Yet if that perseverates or continues, that can and ultimately create some shifts. I think erosion of trust when you have the wrong person in the wrong seat. People start, potentially become fearful. And so having the wrong person in the wrong seat can start to just, some of those other qualities that aren't as objectively quantifiable start to drift from where you're hoping. And then we can have a retention issue. We can have a trust issue. We can have a culture shift. And so I'm curious. I get to talk at a little more of a global level. I'd love to hear from your perspective what you said your gut tells you when someone isn't a good fit. Is there anything else that you've identified as a a lead feeling or measure?
It's interesting. I was reading this article. I don't know where it's from because you read so much, you consume so much throughout the days and years. And it was a scientific article that was distilled into something that I was reading, right? And essentially, the nuts and bolts of it were that there was a control group, a group that had just run a marathon, and a group that was like running from their life from something that they were incredibly afraid of. So 3 different groups. So what they did is they took sweat samples from the people that were fearful and running from their lives, the people that had just like worked out at the gym, and just people who were just in a sauna or just, neutral group. And what they did was they put it in front of a group of people like you or I, you or me. And I always screw that up, but and they said, I want you to smell these different, scents or whatever, and tell me how you feel.
Mm.
And what do you think happened?
Yeah, you can identify the fear.
There was zero change for the groups that were just sitting in a sauna or the people that were just sweating with exercise. But when they smelled the sweat of the people that were running in fear for their lives, they had a tangible autonomic response. Like heart rate increase, respiratory rate increase, just wild stuff. And I think you go back to, I go back to like, again, anecdotal, but like religious school, like your parents, teachings and all these, they're just like, trust your gut, trust your gut, trust your gut. And more often than not, Holly, I feel like that is just it's the best decision, is to go with your gut. And I've been wrong, when I've gone with my gut before, but when I go through my decision-making process, which is just really reflection, make a decision, reflect, sometimes I may have made it without all of the information. Or I may have made it when I was not in an emotionally stable state, or I just didn't have enough sleep, or I didn't have enough to eat, or whatever, But I think that generally, I would say 90% of the time when something's off, confrontation is the best choice, right? And let's talk about confrontation and how difficult of a skill that is to learn, and how to attack that with what I love Mike says, be an ally, not a critic.
Yes.
But it is okay to confront people as an ally as well. We talk about that within our, our green, gray, red concept. But talk to me a little bit about that.
I'd like to shift a little bit from confrontation to conversation. So I think, yes, you need to have the conversation with someone when something doesn't feel right. And the longer you wait, the harder that conversation becomes. Sounds silly, but hey, you start living with a roommate, they leave the cover off the toothpaste. You should say something day one. Hey, Sean, next time you use the toothpaste, you put the cover on it. Moving on.
Holly, she's so annoying.
So annoying. So type A. The said, done, moving on, right? Like you now know the expectation of living together is that you clean up after yourself. Yeah. And
then I'll leave the toilet seat up just to annoy you.
Gosh, bless you, bro. Bless you. But this idea, like if I now wait 3 months, we've been living together 3 months. I'm like, hey, Sean, it really bothers me when you don't put the cover back on the toothpaste. How does that feel for you as the person who's left the cover off the toothpaste? And how does that feel, for me delivering it? A, it's taken me this long to have it. And B, like, oh, what else is Holly harboring over there? Like she's been keeping a tally mark of every day morning that I don't put the cover back on the toothpaste.
Or I say, hey, how come you're not putting away the dishes in the sink? How come you never run the dishwasher? How come you never empty the laundry bin? And then it becomes this huge escalation when it could have just been something simple.
Something simple. So I think you said it that people avoid it because it's hard.
Well, it's easy in the short term.
Well, it gets harder the more you do it. And so for you as a direct personality, like, yeah, let's just say the thing, right? I won't say when we had the mock conversation, check your email is how you would say the issue. Whereas someone with a higher, S personality, going back to DISC, which is 69% of the population, that feels confrontational. That doesn't feel like team harmony. It's like, oh, how do I let Sean know I need him to check his email? I don't want to offend him. It's like, okay, go back to the cover on the toothpaste. If I need Sean to do something, say it as soon as it happens, address it. And the other person's most likely grateful for that feedback because now they know the expectation. The longer we let, poor performance or something that we know is not sitting right slide, the more it grows and snowballs and becomes a bigger deal. And you highlighted something, then it can become like, oh, well, if you're saying this about me, well, then I feel this way about you. And now there's emotion charged in it. And so taking a minute to be like, hey, what is the fundamental thing we need to be talking about here? how do I objectively quantify that and stick with what needs to be the facts versus my feelings? Because feelings are tough.
You know, when you touched on something that's super important, and I think that's clear expectations, right? And as a company, we've kind of gone through, every iteration of the last 8 years, right, of defining what great looks like, not just good. And I think about our annual reviews with our PTs. I feel like we've got that down pat. We know what KPIs we're looking for.
Sure.
We show them what great looks like honestly at day one, week one. And some people think that's maybe a little aggressive, but I think it's important for people to know what great looks like, and then have check-ins along the way. What does great look like at the clinic director level? So like 3 things to you across the board universally. What does great at being a clinic director look like to you?
Oh, gosh. Well, 3 is my favorite number, so thank you for throwing it that way. And I think it goes back to the 3-legged stool. I think understanding the interaction between the team's experience, the patient's experience, and the stability of the practice, being able to really zoom out and understand the interplay between those as a clinic director and what decisions get impacted at what level. I think some people can make a decision, just thinking about, all of our providers want this time off. That'll make our providers happy. Okay. And what does that do for the patient experience? If we have no patients during that time, okay. If we have patients who need that time, maybe we need to come back and consider. And ultimately, what does that do for the practice? And so I think knowing that decisions that are made at a clinic director level have impact across multiple facets and understanding the long-term impact, not just how does Sean feel about this decision? It's, how does every piece of this matter? And what's the interplay between that? And I think great clinic directors have the foresight to see where what they're doing, the why as it rolls up, and the impact of making decisions and changes.
What qualities in a PT or PTA make the best clinic directors?
Oh, I'd love to toss that back to you for 2 reasons. One, we talked about staff PTs, but you guys are creating a system where you have new grads, new hires. Then you have the ability to grow to a team lead, then a clinic director, and now even, a regional role, which is really exciting. So I'm curious. I know what I can say based on my experience, but I'd love to hear from you here at Concierge. What flags you for, we want to keep an eye on this person. We want to invest in them. We want them to grow with us.
Yeah. I mean, how about a little volleyball for, a Tuesday morning? I think that, Holly, what I look for and what I still look for is somebody who raises their hand and says, Sean, I really want to do something great here. I want to be part of your vision of 10 clinics in 10 years. And as it builds beyond that to maybe 25 clinics and, the next 5 years or whatever that looks like, the foundation is the hardest part to build. So finding the right people is honestly the whole battle. It's not even half the battle. And we found a lot of great people here so far. And I feel like some people have come with us and left at the right time, or we've released them at the right time. But the more that I learn, Holly, and the more that we bring on more people, right? And you just get better at it.
Sure.
You get better at seeing the folks who are, quite frankly, like BSing you too. And we've had those people come through and raise their hands, I want this, but they want it for themselves, right? Which is fine. And at some point, the shift from me to we happens, and those people aren't ready for that because they're so used to, I get to make this salary at this level. That's why I want the job, right? Which is why a lot of people reach for leadership, right? Because they think, it's another layer up. It's going to be, they don't think about the responsibility of it. They think how the money is going to change their lives. And I think that it's important to strive to grow your career. But I think being open to the changes that come with the different levels of responsibility is hard to teach. And honestly, I think that the responsibility sometimes is a lot for people.
Yeah.
They realize that like, oh man, this is more than I bargained for originally for the first few months. But then it's like, how do we simplify the role, right?
Sure.
And you just go back to, and we've kind of been through this too as a company where we try to like give people all the nuts and bolts of how to do the job. But when in reality, it's just make sure your staff is heard. You're having, conversations with them weekly, daily, and that their needs are met. The staff then will meet the patient's needs, and the patient's needs will meet the business needs. And it really is that simple, Holly. So to answer your question, I don't know if I've answered it, but, we've hired the best PTs. We've hired the PTs seeing, the highest number of patients per week or per day or whatever that looks like. We've been burned there before, but we've also been successful. As those people shift, they prove that they can do it at that level. Then they've shifted back and allowed their team to succeed. And that's really the best feeling. It's like, okay, listen, there's going to be weeks where you have to step up, and, there's going to be times and there's going to be chapters where, the clinic may go through some flux, right? You had a couple students and now they're gone. You had somebody go out on maternity leave. Things happen at clinics, especially at bigger clinics. You think that you feel them at the smaller clinics more, but you lose 2 or 3 PTs to maternity leave, or, that had students or whatever. Like, there can be a 200 visit shift per week like that. And, I think that it's interesting to see people evolve. But the difference here, Holly, is I think that we've developed this system, Brooke and I have, and honestly, you, of like genuine caring for people. And I think that, when people feel like they actually are given a shit about, like, they're going to do better things, and they're going to show up in a different way. And I think that we've truly cared about everybody that's come through the doors. Early on in the business, it was hard to be both, a leader and a staff clinician. I think anybody who's listening to this that has a small PT practice, or, is a owner of a business or a PT and treating themselves, and they have a small team, really hard to meet the needs of your team when you're, expected to show up at home for your family, for your community, for your patients and your staff. It's just, I would say it's honestly we talk about going back, like, what would you do to start a business today? Like, it's almost impossible, which is probably why 95% of businesses fail, right? Back to you, universally, we know that the top performers aren't always the best leaders. I do think that some top performers can be great leaders. What other, and I guess I'll go back to, and I mean, I'll call out Steph. Like, I think of Steph and how much she's changed. She's our area director here, and she wasn't always the best performer. And I remember, I didn't directly oversee her ever, really. It was through a clinic director. But I remember, and Steph will acknowledge this, like, we were like, Steph, what's going on with Steph? She can only see X amount of visits per week, yada, yada, yada. And she's honestly one of the best leaders that we've had, if not the best, but she's also open to feedback, and she wants to be better every day. So tell me more about that.
I think you highlight a lot of key intangibles for identifying people who will do well. Some of the things you saw early from her, her ability to influence before having any authority, right? So she came in and she's an energy in the clinic. And was it a performance energy? Or was it more of a culture energy? And so highlighting that culture energy, another trait you highlight is like wanting feedback, receiving feedback, requesting feedback, and then integrating it. I think it's one thing to ask for it. It's another thing to then be humble enough to integrate it and make the changes that are recommended. It's easy to say, hey, what could I have done different? Okay, great. I asked what I could have done different. I checked the box, as opposed to, okay, I heard what I could do different. Now I have to reflect and instill a new habit so I can actually move forward and take that feedback and integrate it to moving forward.
But she also needed clarity in that from you and from clinic director, from COO.
Sure.
Right? Because I think I go back to my experience asking for exactly what Steph was asking for and getting zero clarity in return.
Yes.
And how frustrating that can be.
Well, we touched with that earlier. Like, do people want to know what excellent looks like? Yeah. And we'll talk about that balance of, caring and being clear. And so do people know that we care about them as people? And are we still holding them accountable to the expectations of doing a job? We won't go down the whole work-life balance. We won't go down the things like we're doing a job here as physical therapists. And so there are expectations related to that. And we're people caring for people. So ultimately, we also need to be cared for because you can't pour from an empty cup. So I think that balance of caring and being clear with people, and sometimes that gets out of whack. Sometimes it's easier to be a friend to someone. Sometimes it's easier just to rely on the metrics. And how do we find that balance between the two? And that's where the real success in leadership is.
How does building leaders actually change the trajectory of a company?
You and I talk a lot about growth, right? I love the 10 and 10. And I would argue that having a bench of leaders is more important than having a map of locations. So that depth that you're building matters, because the right person in a mediocre location is better than a great location with the wrong person. And so every time you grow, every time you expand, you basically have an ambassador of Concierge that's now representing that location. And so that, to me, is understanding in order to be an ambassador, what clarity does that leader need? You talk about excellence, you've talked about expectations, values, that being abundantly clear and knowing like, hey, we care about you. We want you to do well. We want you to succeed here. This is what that looks like. That balance between the two allows for that growth to happen.
So tell me more about that, because I think that's such an interesting perspective. And we've talked about this internally and with you a ton, right? So why doesn't it work when you hire somebody from outside to open up a brand new clinic for you?
Oh, gosh.
Like right away, right? Like, and I'm
Yeah.
saying like zero lead up, but like, hey, we're opening up Boston tomorrow. And, Joe Smith is going to open up that clinic,
Yep.
but he's coming from somewhere else.
Sure.
Day one, right?
Yeah.
What are the challenges there?
Gosh, Joe Smith is most likely a great operator, right? Maybe even a phenomenal clinician. He might bring a great book of business, yet is he an ambassador of the CPT way? And so if you're expanding your footprint, are you expanding your footprint just to get big? Or are you expanding the footprint to spread the culture and expectations and service that is correlated with CPT? So can you find an external good fit? I wouldn't write it totally off the books. And we've seen more challenges than successes if that person is to be dropped in right out of the gate. Because a team performer, a CPT ambassador is not the same as a stellar clinician, a senior clinician, a well-trained clinician. Those are two different buckets and they can be overlapping, yet the experience of knowing the way is important to drive culture forward.
It's interesting. And I think about, and I'm sure, I don't know if anybody else listening to this podcast has ever thought about franchising, right? And I think about, there's a book that I just read. It's something like Scaling Up or something like that. And they talk about building $100 million businesses. And they talk about accelerating timelines, right? So like if you had a goal of opening up 10 clinics, how could you do it, this year, right? So to speak. So we're at 5 clinics now. What would you have to do to radically different to open up, the next 5 clinics in 1 year? And it's funny, and it got me thinking, because one of the anecdotes that they used was a rug company. And they talked about this rug company had, he was somebody like me who had, 5 or 6 stores himself. And then he had a bunch of franchisees. Some were performing and some were not performing. And in order to reach his revenue goal, he came to the realization that he had to cut the stores that were not performing, right? Because he needed to raise the floor to his level. And it really got me thinking, because I had considered kind of potentially franchising and doing that model. And I'm not saying that I would never consider that again, but what do you do when you franchise, right? You hand somebody a playbook. Here's how we do things at CPT, right? But do you ever sit there, ideally you sit there for 90 days or some sort of onboarding program, like teaching them how you build your culture, how you do this, how you do that. But it's a lot different playing the game of football than it is reading about it on the sidelines. So tell me more about, and again, like we're really trying to build up our team leads as that next layer for the clinic directors, and the clinic directors as the next layer for area managers. Tell me what you think about that, and tell me more about how important it is to develop the culture before or around a new team.
I think you highlight a really important component, right? Like we have a nurture cycle and recruitment strategy for bringing external talent, attracting external talent. Once they're in the fold with us, like it doesn't stop there. And I think that's the part that's interesting, right? Like, oh, we have, 45 FTEs, like check the box. Like, no, we're bringing people in. And then from there, we're growing and nurturing and developing them. And so as leaders, we're always thinking like, who's next up? So as soon as someone in the role becomes a team lead, we want them already thinking like, okay, when I get to go up, who's going to be the next best fit to fill this role? And am I embodying everything that a great team lead is? We know that, example is the lowest level of leadership. And at the same time, the visibility of what that looks like is really important. So I think having the team leads looking out for other team leads, having clinic directors looking out for the next clinic director, I think having your regional director looking out for the next one, having that readiness of like, okay, just because we filled it, now we're already looking for the next one. Think about baseball leagues. Think about, all the levels of, calling people up. We want to have them ready, trained, acclimated to having the skills and exposure. And then they get to come up and play in the next round. There'll be a learning curve and they're going to be better equipped because they've worked with us previously as opposed to coming in from another team. Because I love what you said. Football is different, right? Can you imagine going around to all the different NFL locker rooms? The culture is different in each one of them, but the sport's fundamentally the same. I think you think of physical therapy the same way. The way that care can be delivered fundamentally has an anchoring, yet the way it's done varies significantly from practice to practice, and that's the differentiator.
It's a good analogy.
Thank you.
But I think that, when you think about the development of people, right? You think about, and talk to me more about bringing people up the ladder with you. Mm-hmm. And the one thing that I would challenge you on with like the baseball analogy or even football, like developing these minor league teams and bringing them up, is that's a finite game, right? Like there's no further level that you're going than the NFL in the United States, right? Or MLB in the United States, in my opinion. But in our levels, right? Like at every layer, you want to be pulling somebody up behind you, right? Because that person who's taking your job tomorrow is allowing you to grow tomorrow as well, right? And I think that's the fundamental difference is like, I want to develop Holly as the team lead because when she's ready to lead this clinic, then guess what? I'm ready to have a cluster of clinics, right? Or more responsibility. And in this business, like it never ends. They could oversee 100 clinics, 200 clinics, 250 clinics. I don't know what the largest PT clinics have now, 500 or 1,000, but, I'd love to open up, if we have the capacity for it, 100 clinics across the United States. And, but we can't do that without people with a fundamental philosophy of bringing people up under, like grabbing them and dragging them up the ladder with them. Talk to me more about that.
Well, I think that's where the sports fall short in a way because, right, a lot of that's individual performance. Hey, if I get good enough, I'll get called up. And that's not what we're trying to create. We're trying to create more of like, I know the culture, I know the way I can motivate and inspire others, and I understand the vision. So therefore, I'm ready to move up because I'm prepared to lead other people in doing that and not just myself. And so I think the difference between sports acceleration versus leadership acceleration, that's where that diverges and no longer makes sense.
But even just to get on the map in sports, like you have to be a great player, right? And part of that is like, got to take the con eds, got to take the grass, and got to take the dry needling, the spinal manip, whatever it takes, the MGH, IHP course, right? Like, things like this that put you on the map as a great clinician, then give you the next level opportunities. Right? You can't just mail it in because then you're never going to make the team in the first place. So I think that, but talk to me more about clarity and expectations and how important that is.
We talked about allyship earlier, right? And the idea of like, if I don't know where the mark is, I don't know if I'm hitting it or missing it. And so that allyship of understanding like, hey, Holly, here's what our expectations are for you. And then making sure a leader knows how to coach, train, elevate someone to hit those. And that's not just saying, Holly, you need to hit this metric, right? That's some coaching and skill of like, hey, why does this metric matter? Like, why do we measure this big picture? Right? Like, why do we measure range of motion and strength in our patients, right? We want to make sure we're progressing and we're hitting the mark. So why do we measure these things? That clarity of the why behind it, and then what we measure, and then understanding, okay, what are the lead behaviors you need to make to drive those measures? Because a lot of those are in the rears, right? So that idea of like, I actually have to do something today for that metric to be different next week. And that's in an Amazon day and age, that's tricky. I say, PTs have to learn to become farmers. And this stinks, right? Because you have to plant the seed, you have to nurture it, you have to water it. And then you're hoping you get the result. Because what you do today actually will help what happens tomorrow, but you can't get back up and look at it. You just need to trust that everything you're doing day in and day out will give you the crop that you're looking for. So when you have the clarity about the crop expectation, you know how to nurture it and prepare it, You're doing all the things that lead up to that clarity. So for me, I want to know what success for me looks like at CPT. I want to know what my roles could be if I excel. And so when you've created that clarity for people, they know staff PT is not where I need to be unless I want to. I can grow and develop and lead. And this is what I need to hit in order to accomplish that. That's that clarity. And so one other important part that I think is important is the clarity, not only as we elevate in levels, but as we bring people on board and across. So I like to say, hey, if you're going to sell me a Porsche and give me a Kia, I'm going to be really disappointed. And there's nothing wrong with a Kia. What I need, though, is the expectation of like, hey, I want to drive off with a high-performance sports engine as opposed to a reliable car. So we need to make sure when we're bringing people on, I think you need to understand the expectations from the time you look at the job posting. Like, what is expected from you to drive excellence here? And then we touch in at that 30, 60, 90, and it's consistent. We ramp up, but you know what the ultimate goal is. And then when you have those annual reviews, when you have your one-on-ones with your clinic directors, the expectations are still what was set early on, and we're not creating moving goalposts all the time, because that consistency builds that trust, builds that ability to know what the expectation is so you can excel and move forward.
So Holly, we talk about the roadmap and developing a roadmap at Concierge PT, right? Because there's different opportunities, and we've developed opportunities for clinicians that want to do marketing. We've developed opportunities for clinicians that want to stay clinical and do sort of, take students and do more clinical training with our staff. Talk to me about what the roadmap here looks like in terms of leadership and what some of the gateway behaviors are.
Sure. So we've established, you come in as a new hire, and then there's the opportunity. You guys expose your team to leadership development right out of the gate. So people have leadership skills that they're learning regardless of their title. So all new hires are going through this amazing training where they get to learn a lot of the soft skills. Then as we elevate to team lead, there's an opportunity for us to start to look more in the application of those behaviors when you start to be accountable to things outside of your individual performance. So people we look for when you think about team leads, the ones who are curious, the ones who demonstrate influence, like they walk into the clinic and they can command a presence, they can positively change the room. People are excited and are fueled by their energy. That's a great starting point. They can be a high performer, but they don't necessarily need to. I think the positive challenge, like they're okay saying, I don't agree with that, and here's why, and here's what I'd do different. So they are problem solvers. They think outside the box. Those are some of the lead behaviors. The challenging ones, sometimes they want coaching, and that's an investment of time and effort and can feel a little bit, I think that's often sometimes written off by leaders. Like, I just don't have the time to give them what they need. And that's like, okay, that's someone who wants to be nurtured. That's worth investing in because they're demonstrating that hunger of wanting to do more, learn more, and be more. So I think that's your team lead behaviors. The clinic director, that's a significant step. Roles and responsibilities change significantly for a team lead to a clinic director. I think we hit pretty hard on the difficult conversations and accountability, that balance of kindness and clarity, that ability to hold people accountable. And a lot of times they were your peers. And that's the struggle. Like, oh, well, I used to work side by side with Sean. Now I have to manage him and let him know he's missing the mark.
Yeah. Now he thinks he's the man because he's the clinic director and he can't spend time with me anymore.
Oh, exactly. He's too cool for me. And so keeping that care component in it while also relying on the clarity of expectations. And hey, if you're missing the mark, how can we get you there? That allyship we talked about. Then when you get up to clinic director and start thinking about regional director, that to me, your ability to see big picture matters there. So you're going from individual performance to helping team management when you're at a team lead. Your clinic director is overseeing the whole performance of a location. And that's a lot of responsibility. And it's still kind of one column amongst many. When you elevate up to that regional role, you now have a lot of pieces, a lot of columns that you're looking at and how the pieces all fit together, not only operationally, but now you have some financial exposure, understanding how the finances of the business work. So people who are hungry, that love the metrics, love the challenge, and love the interaction of growing a team and holding people accountable. And that's a special breed.
Yeah, I think, and it takes, I think it's important it would be so hard for us, Holly, to bring in an area director from outside, and I think about even bringing in clinic directors from outside,
Sure.
Because you go back to that, they've got to live it, and they need to be an ambassador for the brand in order for it to really work, right? And to motivate people, motivate their teams.
Sure.
What's the cost of promoting the wrong person?
Outside of financially.
Yeah, well,
No, that's a big one,
Yeah.
I think culture can be impacted by elevating the wrong person, which then leads to trust. Trust leads to retention. So I think that cost is outside of just the dollars and cents. I think the wrong person in the wrong seat for too long can really be that bad apple we talked about earlier. So there's a lot of cost, and then that's harder to replace and rebuild. It's harder to rebuild culture than it is to, bring in the right person. So that's the part that's hard to accept, because I'm people first, and the wrong person can really be detrimental far beyond just their individual performance when it starts to bleed down to the team. And then that impact of rebuilding is tough.
What are the traits that you see? And you just give me because 3 is your favorite number. The 3 most common traits that you see immediately when you know it's not the right person.
That they feel like their individual performance can outdo a subpar team performance. They know that there's difficult conversations that need to be had, and they don't know how to have them, or they have them in a way that doesn't portray the allyship and caring component that's needed.
They critique.
Tell. Yes. Tell. I think they also...
why can't you just do it? It's so easy.
Or as you and I talk about, like, hey, back in the day when I was doing this, we just pulled up our bootstraps. Like, that's my story. It's unfair for me to put that on you as a leader. The third thing, it's good. I do love 3, and you got a good one here. So they think they can do it all themselves. They can't or won't have the hard conversation or won't do it well. And lastly, I think that they, are excited about the authority, not necessarily the responsibility. So we talked about
or the money.
Well, I'm excited for,
the next level,
the next level.
Growth.
Yes. Yep. And they're excited about, I can say I'm this role, which is exciting, right? And there's so much more like, to whom much is given, much is expected. Like, there's a lot that's expected in that role. And so excited about the role versus excited about what comes along with it is probably my third flag.
And I think that that's also on the leadership team too. It's like the clarity around, hey, this is the role, and it's not a walk in the park.
No.
It's a difficult role. It's a difficult jump, and we're here to support you.
Yes.
So I think we've learned in the past, I think we probably promoted the wrong people, right, in the past in some scenarios, but we also didn't have the support to give them. We've learned from that. And now we have you guys.
And I think you highlight the thing, learning from it is the most important, because we all should look back a year, 18 months and be like, oh, I would have done that differently, right? Because that shows that we're changing and evolving. If we say like, oh, that's what we've always done, that to me is a red flag across, a practice, because that's not going to get you somewhere. So those learnings, like, you're going to have missteps, and it's how you bounce back. It's how you calibrate moving forward. That's going to be the differentiator.
We talked about, and you talked about identifying the future leaders, right? And you identified that those PTs, who are often staff PTs, and I call them like PTs that raise their hands, require coaching, and they really need to be built. So, honestly, if you're a PT and you're listening to this podcast and you want to become a leader, not just treat more patients and get, more responsibility without the skills to be able to handle that responsibility. It's exactly what we're trying to build here at Concierge with you guys, Holly.
Yeah, I think you guys are finding the opportunity to teach people about what the role looks like and then coach them into that. So we need to give them the skills first and then show them how to play, right? I wouldn't put a golf club in your hands and tell you to play golf if I haven't actually taught you how to play the sport yet, right? Coaching you when you don't know how to use the equipment or understand the game's unfair. So yes, we're teaching people what the game is and what we see as winning and excellence. And then we're giving an opportunity to coach them, which to help them excel, find some of their blind spots, lean into the areas of growth, and let them come back and say, hey, this is going well and this isn't. And it's a safe space for them to work through the challenges that they have so that they can excel and grow and move forward.
Yeah. And I love the golf analogy because I'm a golfer, but you know, you got to teach the game of golf, but you also need to give consistent feedback, right? So you got to stay with that person as they play their, all of their rounds that year. You got to check in with them and say, hey, what's going well, what's not going well. In golf, you get video feedback. Here you get the Zoom calls where you role play and say, hey, I had this challenging scenario this week. Like, how would you have done it differently? Or why don't I role play this with Evan and see how that goes? And I'd love to hear your feedback, right? Because great golfers don't get better from just, getting advice from the guys that they play with. They need a professional to be able to give them the feedback. And that's what we've developed here.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You said something and I was like, oh, that is such a good point. Oh, I love that. I told so-and-so that needed to change. And you're like, and when was the last time you checked in with them, right? You highlighted that consistency matters, right?
Yeah.
I haven't lifted a golf club in months at this point. I can't expect to go out there and excel at it, right? That idea of practicing and getting in the reps and holding people like that cadence of accountability to ensure follow through and growth. And that's a critical part of receiving coaching, of developing as a leader. And we often think, oh, I told Sean to do that. He's got it. And then 3 months go by, 6 months go by, nothing's changed. It's like, oh, well, Sean should have known. I told him. Well, were you an ally? Did you support him? Were you were you checking in? Were you helping to clear the obstacles? Were you setting them up for success? And so I think that's a leader's challenge too, is they think sometimes we can set it and forget it. And they forget, oh, right, I haven't checked back in. See how that's going. Because that's where sometimes we get frustrated as leaders. And it's an opportunity for us to hold people accountable and be consistent.
100%. And I just think back to the one word that to me defines what leadership looks like in my path. And it's just relational. It's so easy to be clear about expectations, but if you don't have a relationship with the people that are driving the business forward and they don't understand that you care, then it's really, really hard to be a good leader.
Absolutely.
We're going to end with a couple fast questions here. So,
okay.
I want you to tell me one leader whom you admire and why.
I love that because I ask your team members and everyone who starts the leadership one, I'm like, no one has actually ever asked it back, which is lets me skate, right? I'm not held accountable because no one's asking me that.
Yeah. For the record, this is me holding Holly Petersen accountable.
Hear it. This is going to sound dorky. I admit it, but Mike Osler for me.
Okay.
I love doing leadership training now because I can help people become the leader that I wish I had been. I've grown and developed a lot, and Mike is someone who I can go to with a challenge, with something, and he pushes me to find my own solutions, challenges my thinking, and at no point is there any fear that what I might say is wrong or that it's not what he's looking for. There's a level of trust there that allows me to be vulnerable and challenged at the same time. And to me, that has helped me grow as a leader. And I admire that in someone who can care about you and challenge you at the same time. And those two qualities I think are really important.
Love that. Shout out to Mike.
Yeah. Hey, Mike.
Favorite food?
Oh, gosh. Fresh on the mind. I just learned how to make massaman curry.
What is that?
Yeah. So we have a new Thai restaurant in town and I love this curry. I'm totally new novice when it comes to curries, but I was like, hey, I want to see if I can make this myself. So right now, curry base, sweet potatoes, carrots, onions, and chicken. Made it from home, made it from scratch, and it was delicious. So that it's on the forefront of my brain. So that and ice cream.
Okay. What kind of ice cream?
Ooh, big fan, local shout out to South Shore, known as homemade ice cream is my favorite because the ratio of ingredients of toppings that are on the inside, right? The ratio of getting something good with cookie dough, there's cookie dough in every bite. And to me, that's incredibly important. And I'd say coffee Oreo is my favorite.
Okay, interesting. All right, now we know what to get Holly for.
I was going to say, great, Holly. Now we're going to be can you make this Thai dish?
I'm I need you to work for us for...
I only find my recipes on TikTok.
Okay.
They lost me after 5 ingredients. I'm done.
ChatGPT is how I did it. I was like, hey.
That's how she makes her Sunday night dinner.
Some pesto pasta now with force and cheese and I literally put it to ChatGPT. I was like, I have this in my fridge. I think this could make something.
Yes.
Can you? And it literally was yep.
Love that.
I eat it every Sunday.
You're make it better.
Well, I copy pasted. I was like, here's my favorite Thai recipe from my favorite Thai restaurant. is it possible to make this at home? Can I make it in a slow cooker versus spend the time? It's great. I was like, all right, make me a shopping list. And then I was like, walk me through the steps on how to make this.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's
Love
great.
it,
Will your kids eat it?
My youngest tried it. My oldest, as soon as she saw the onions, was like, I'm out. My husband said top three meals I've ever made. So I was like,
All right, I need the recipe.
ChatGPT, yeah,
I need the recipe.
ChatGPT, good for the win.
Yeah. All right, last question.
Yes.
It's really 2 in 1.
Okay.
Favorite book and favorite leadership book.
Oh gosh. So this is my like recency bias, right? Like the things that I like because I recently read them. I really enjoyed God of the Woods as my fiction book. Read that one recently. And then I'm in the middle of it, so I don't know if it's fair. I'm loving Stronger Ground by Brené Brown right now. It talks a lot about the balance that we're talking about with that vulnerability and caring and holding people accountable. And she just presents it in a way that's really resonating with me for what I'm seeing in my work. So it's exciting to have a new book. It's relatively new. It's out there to push me forward, challenge my ways of thinking, and make sure I'm not getting stagnant in, the work that I'm doing with the groups that we are so fortunate to work with.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Holly. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been great.